Hello, hello. Welcome to Beach Church. My name is Ryan. We are in week 2 of the At the Movie series where we look at a movie each week and we find God's truth in it. And this week we're looking at Black Panther. I have a confession to make. The bad guy on this movie, Michael B. Jordan, plays Killmonger. I think he's the coolest person in the world. I have a major man crush on him. I wish I was him. I just watched that movie and I just want to be him every time I watch it. But we're here to talk about being like Jesus. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm not going to preach about him. I'm going to preach about Jesus. Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 13. We're going to kind of stop and start today. We're going to look at a lot of different scenes throughout the movie. And so it'll be a little bit different than usual. But we're going to start with 2 scriptures, 2 teachings of Jesus. And this first one is from Matthew chapter 5. Jesus says this: "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again?" So salt doesn't either give taste or preserve something. What's the point of it? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot, like dirt, basically. Then he continues, "You are the light of the world," which we read this and we think, well, he was talking to Paul or Peter and John and all that kind of stuff. And so we're like, of course they are the light of the world. But we have to remember at that time, he's talking to a bunch of people that are nobodies. They have no power, they have no authority, they're living under the Roman Empire, and they are like the nobodies of the earth. And he's telling them, not only are you the salt of the earth, but you're the light of the world. To which they would have been like, what are you talking about? We're not the light of anything. He continues, "A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. "Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house." If you grew up in Sunday school, you learned the song, "This little light of mine, and then we say, "Hide it under a bushel." No! And we would all the little kids would scream, "No!" They indoctrinated us with these weird little songs, but they were based off of the real teachings of Jesus, and that's what it was based off of. So we'd sing that all the time about how we are called to go out into the world and have this light and this saltiness. And Jesus continues, "In the same way, like a light, a city on a hill, like a light put on its stand, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and not glorify you, but glorify your Father in heaven." And if you skip back to Matthew 28, this is the closing words of the book, the Gospel of Matthew. And Jesus has died and resurrected. He's coming, he's talking to his disciples and his followers. There are about 120 of them at this point, and he is about to leave the earth. And here are the last words he gives to them. And they essentially are going to mirror what he had taught a little bit earlier in Matthew chapter 5. Here's what he says. He says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore," so because I have authority, Jesus says, because I have authority of heaven and of earth, you are to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So because I have authority and power, I'm sending you out. But don't worry, I'm coming with you to be the light, to be the salt of the earth. So keeping those 2 teachings in mind, let's check out this first scene from Black Panther. So in the first scene, we see the power of the nation of Wakanda. They have been started on this power source, this substance known as vibranium. And vibranium is this substance that it allows them to have technology beyond anybody else in the world, to be rich and to have education and medicine that is far beyond anybody else in the world. But as the narrator says, as Wakanda does well, the rest of the world is in chaos. But to protect their secret, to protect their power, to protect their technology, to protect their way of life, they decide that we are going to hide our power from the world. We're not going to flaunt it. We're not going to use it and show everybody how great we are. We're going to be satisfied looking like a developing country with just farmers and rainforest. And we are going to hide in plain sight and not allow anyone to know, because we don't want to let this power get into the wrong hands, and we don't want our way of life to be affected. But again, as things are going great for them, it's not going so great for the rest of the world. And things go this way for thousands of years. And when I hear and see that first scene, it's so easy for us to be like, well, that's selfish. Like that's terrible. They have this great power and they could share it with the world. In fact, they could even have power over the world. They could run the world and they could help people and they could do all kinds of things and yet they just hide. Why would they hide that power? Well, the truth is it's very similar to what the church does. It's very similar to what Christians do all the time, what Christians have done for thousands of years. See, the followers of Jesus have the power of the gospel. The followers of Jesus have the power of the gospel, the hope of the gospel. The gospel, if you're new to church, the gospel is that Jesus, who is God, came to earth. He didn't ignore us and say, oh, they'll figure it out on their own, or maybe they can fix it. He knew we could not save ourselves, so he came to earth. He died a death that took on the punishment for everything we've ever done wrong. He rose again to conquer death and sin. And he said, with a relationship with me, with faith in me, you don't have to do anything. But with a faith in me, your life can be changed. Your eternity can be changed. You can have a power and a hope that you never could have imagined. And we've taken that hope so often and hidden it within the walls of churches and hidden it within ourselves and only talked about it with other people in our churches or in our little social clubs. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is in chaos. Neighbors' hearts are in chaos. Relationships in chaos. And we have a hope. We have a power. We have an authority that Jesus gave us, and yet we're just kind of sitting on it. And this isn't a new thing. It started really from the very beginning of the church. A couple hundred years after Jesus is ascending into heaven, there were these people that ended up going out into the desert and going out into the caves and living alone. And we call them monks. And they would build these monasteries and these communities in the middle of nowhere, out in the deserts, in the quiet places. And their theory was essentially, the world is terrible. Even the church, we don't really like everything they're doing. And so we're just gonna go out on our own. And if we can just go and sit and pray for 23 hours a day alone in a cave, then everything will be okay. And there were some good things that came out of that movement, but the ultimate reality is that they were hiding from the world. They weren't impacting the rest of society because they were just concerned with them, their relationship with God, how much they knew. And again, it wasn't all bad, but it became a trend in the church. That whenever we got fed up with the world, whenever we're like I'm not sure about what these people are doing, they don't agree with us. Whenever we got fed up with something, we should just hide. We should withdraw. The problem is we never see that anywhere in Jesus' life. We do see him going for little bits of time to pray and be with the Father, as we should, and spending alone time with God. But he never just withdrew for years at a time or for his whole lifetime. No, he was among people. And he was very clear about what we are to do with the gospel, what we are to do with the love of God. We're to be salt. We're to be light. We are to go out and share it with other people. He says, go and make disciples. And it wasn't just him, because his earliest followers, his closest friends, all said the same thing. Peter says, you should always have a reason for the hope when people ask you. When you have a hope in your heart and someone's like, why do you have hope in this world? You should have an answer to them. And that's Jesus. Paul says we are to go and spread the gospel and talk about Jesus Christ crucified and resurrected. John said, man, if you have the love of the Father, you're gonna love other people. You're gonna show that love to other people. And if you don't, are you even a follower of Jesus? Are you even a lover of God? James, the half-brother of Jesus, said, man, if you don't live like Jesus, if you don't obey, if you don't go and love people and give to people, if you're not generous, are you even a Christian? They said these things because they had a reality in their mind that came straight from Jesus, which was, we are to share what we have, not to keep it to ourselves. And today we do the same thing. We kind of keep it to ourselves. And we have a lot of reasons for this. We'll go over some of them, but we get stuck in this church world sometimes, which is probably one of our biggest problems, We should be surrounded by great community. We should be in worship every week. We should be living with accountability from friends. We need that. However, when we are so insulated with that we don't even know non-Christians, that we're not willing to give to people that don't know Jesus, that we're not willing to share the gospel with other people, there is a problem. There is a problem. And we look a lot like Wakanda does in this movie. We are hiding in plain sight. And we hide our faith for a variety of reasons. We hide our faith to protect our way of life. We hide our faith to protect our reputation and what people think of us. We hide our faith to protect our pride and our ego. We don't want to look foolish. Especially in America, we hide our faith because we want to be comfortable. We want to be comfortable. And we see a lot of these same reasonings from King T'Challa in this next scene. So check it out. So Nakia is a spy for Wakanda. And so she has seen the outside world. And we hear her point of view in this scene. She says, well, there are people hurting. I can't just sit here in our happy country with great medicine that saves basically any kind of disease, and with our riches and with our technology. I can't just sit here while people around the world suffer. And King T'Challa says, but there's a reason why we don't go into the world. And here's this dilemma that we fight with. He gives two reasons. He says, one, those people aren't like us, which is something we talk about a lot, don't we? We hear a lot in Christian circles. Well, the world's not like us. Well, and then we like take Jesus' word and we like mix it up. Well, Jesus told us not to go into the world. No, he didn't say that. He said to go into the world, not be like the world. He didn't say to not go into the world, to ignore the world. And then King T'Challa says something else. He says, well, not only are they not like us, but we could lose our way of life, which is something that I think we as Christians get scared of. We don't want to lose our faith, and so we hide away from the world. Or we do the other thing that really doesn't work, is that we fight. We argue. You don't argue people to salvation. It just usually doesn't happen. Your emojis and all your punctuation and capital letters on your Facebook post isn't going to lead someone to Jesus. We don't argue our way to Jesus, to argue people to Jesus. And we also don't hide from people and just hope for the best. There's a third option, which we'll get to in a moment. But the truth is that we can reach the world. We can reach the world without compromising our faith in Jesus and what he teaches. We can reach the world without compromising our faith in Jesus and what he teaches. This is what Nakia is saying. She's like, we can aid the world and protect our way of life and live as we have lived. We don't have to choose. But a lot of times we have chosen. When I was in middle school, I was at this private school, Christian school, and all the time, and maybe if you grew up in the 90s or if you remember the 90s, it was like in church world, it was like nobody wanted to be around secular stuff. Like, oh, we don't watch secular movies. It's like a Disney movie. It's not bad. Well, it's not about Jesus, so it must be bad. And it's like, what? And it's like, oh, well, we don't listen to secular music. It's like it's like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. It's not that bad. And it's like, no, it's bad because it's not about Jesus. And it was like this whole thing where it's like, you have to be in church world, not secular world. We don't see that from Jesus. We don't see a Jesus that said, hide away, guys. The secular world's gonna come and hurt you. We see a Jesus that said, go out into that world and share my love. We can reach the world without compromising our faith in Jesus and what he teaches. And we see this in Jesus. We see this in Jesus. He went among people that were not following God, and yet he never became like them. He influenced people. He was not influenced. He hung out with drunkards, and he didn't get drunk. He hung out with prostitutes, and he didn't take advantage of them or use their bodies like everybody else did. He valued them. He hung out with tax collectors who everybody said were the scum of the earth. Nobody liked them. The Romans didn't like them. The Jewish people didn't like them, and nobody wanted to be around them. He hung out with them, and he didn't start cheating people and start harming people like they did. No, he just loved them. And see, that's the third option. We don't have to argue with people, and we don't have to run away from people. We can simply love people. And we can love people who disagree with us. And I know we don't like to hear that in the 21st century in America with all the politics and crap all over the news and social media. It's like, no, we have to take a side. We have to take a stand. And there are some things we need to take a stand on. But you can take a stand on something while still loving the person who is on the other side of the argument. Can I say that again? You can take a stand for something without stopping the love towards the person on the other side of the argument. They're ultimately not the enemy. Evil is the enemy. Sin is the enemy, not that person. And if we love them, we stand a chance. And if we don't, we stand no chance. But often, we focus on ourselves more than we focus on other people. We're more concerned with ourselves, and it's so hard to love other people when we're so concerned with ourselves. And we'll never share the power of God unless we get close enough to the world to see how much they need God, which is what King T'Challa finds out in this next scene. So this is where T'Challa starts to kind of change his perspective. And why does his perspective change? Because he sees a friend of his, a CIA agent, get shot in the spine and is about to die. And he knows that his technology and his nation can save the man. And it was easy for him to say, Wakanda first, Wakanda first, Wakanda first. We got to care about ourselves. We got to care about our way of life in the last scene. But when he sees death firsthand, he no longer has the same opinion. He starts to change his perspective. He starts to change his opinion because now he has gotten close to someone who can benefit from him. He's looking the man in the eyes and he's seeing the life leave his body. And he knows, I can change his future. I can save his life. We have to get close enough to the brokenness of the world to want to change it. We have to get close enough to the brokenness of the world to want to change it. See, it's easy. It's so easy to be in church world and to see the rest of the world and look at the news and social media and be like, I can't believe people live that way. This group of people, this faith system, this political system, this group of people that believes this or lives this way, like they're the enemy. They don't have it right. And maybe they don't. You're probably right. But when you just look at people that way, you start to just generalize. But when you get close to someone that has a different opinion than you, because they were raised in a different place and had different family and had a different past, and you start to listen, which is something we're not very good at as a church. We're not very good at listening to the outside world. We just want to preach, and we don't want to listen to what got them to the place where they're at. When we're willing to listen, when we're willing to get close, our opinions will change. It's easy to have an opinion about a group of people until you meet one person, one face, and they become a name, and you get to know their life, and then you start talking to them. A lot more can happen there than when we just throw out generalizations. But that's what we do. We just like to throw out these generalizations. But when we get close to it, we realize how much the world can benefit from Jesus. We realize that other people didn't have maybe the same opportunities or the same parents or the same church body around them and maybe don't know yet, but they can know through you, through a relationship. This is a place where I've often fallen short, especially since I've been working at a church. I never wanted to be that guy, but I found myself more and more surrounded by church people, which in some ways that's great, but in some ways it's terrible because it's hard for me to be salt when everybody else is already salt. It's hard for me to be light among a bunch of lights. You have to go into the world. And maybe the most spiritual thing we can do is not have another Bible study. Maybe the most spiritual thing we can do is not have another prayer session. Maybe the most spiritual thing you can do is build a real relationship with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Or build a real relationship with someone who's going through a divorce, or build a real relationship with someone who's just experienced death, or is having financial issues, or is just hurting in this world. Maybe someone that believes something totally different than you. Because when we do that, we start to have compassion. It's very difficult to have compassion on a group of people. It's far more easy to have compassion on one person when you hear their story and you talk to them. And when you get close to that brokenness, you start wanting to share your light. And you start wanting to share your hope and the power of the gospel and the leading of the Holy Spirit and God working within you to change other people. But if you're not around hurting people, you're not going to care much for hurting people. And it's not just sharing the gospel. I mean, that's the most important thing, but it's not only that. It's also just physical resources. See, in church world, a lot of times we're far too selfish with our stuff, and our time and our money. And Jesus' early followers, Jesus himself, but Jesus' early followers were very clear on this point. Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11 says this, "You will be enriched in every way." We like that part. We're like, yeah, let me be enriched. "You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion." You have money? That's an opportunity to be generous. You have a home? That's an opportunity to be generous. You have influence? That's an opportunity to be generous. You have encouragement? That's an opportunity to be generous. You have an able body that you can go serve someone or work for someone. That's an opportunity to be generous. You know something about some subject. That's an opportunity to be generous as you help somebody else learn. There are so many things that we are enriched with that we have the opportunity to be generous with. And yet so often we just keep them to ourselves. But look at what Paul says is the point of this. He says, through your generosity, it will result in thanksgiving to God. The point of it is not to point to yourself. The point of it is not pat myself on the back, I did so good. The point of it is to point back to the generosity and the love of God. When we are willing to give, it will change the world. It will change other people's lives. Some people don't need to hear your sermon. Some people need to be served by you, to experience your generosity. And then maybe they'll listen to your preaching. And then in 1 Peter chapter 4, Peter, one of the close friends of Jesus, says this. In chapter 4, verse 10, he says, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have to serve others." Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. So Paul and Peter are on the same page with this. They both were saying the same thing. We are to be generous with our stuff. And in the American church, we have a lot of stuff to be generous with. We have an education system that we are educated enough to be generous. We have money. Even if you're under the poverty line in America, you're richer than like 90% of the world. You have the opportunity to be generous. You have the opportunity to be generous by opening your home, by feeding someone a meal, by talking to someone, by listening to someone. We have opportunities to be generous all the time, and yet we don't take them. Sometimes our biggest problem is we only want to preach the gospel and we don't want to give to anybody. And we have to do both. And if we do both, people's lives can be changed. In this next scene, we see where T'Challa goes and he has a conversation with his dad, who's dead. Don't ask me to explain it, it's a movie. But he's talking to his dead dad, and they're having a conversation about how they have done things in the past and how King T'Challa wants to do things in the future. What a change in T'Challa's opinions. From the beginning of the movie where he says, Wakanda first, our way of life first, to this scene where he's screaming at the ancestors, what were you thinking? We had so much to offer, we had so much to give, and yet we just sat by as people died and suffered all around us. What are we doing? We're not gonna do that anymore. We are going to share what we have, our power, our technology, for us, our hope in Jesus, the love of God. We are going to share what we have with the rest of the world. He says something to the effect of these words. He says, we're not going to allow fear to stop us from doing what is right. So often we let fear dictate our lives and our faith. We let fear stop us from sharing the gospel and our resources. We'll let the fear of offending people stop us from sharing the gospel, which the truth is we're really good at offending people in America. I mean, we do it all the time. You do it all the time. We all do it. Even if you're like the most PC person in the world, you offend people. Trust me. Like, we all offend people. We're not really worried about offending people. We're more worried about looking foolish. And we may say, well, I don't want to offend somebody who doesn't believe the same thing. Well, you can do it without offending them. You can do it with gentleness and respect. As Peter says in 1 Peter, you don't have to be mean and aggressive with it. See, the problem isn't that we don't want to offend people. The problem is we don't want to look foolish. Well, what are they going to think of me? Well, are they going to think I'm stupid for believing in a God I can't see? Are they going to think I'm stupid for going to church? Are they going to think I'm foolish? Are they going to think I'm overstepping bounds? Are they going to think, like, well, what are they going to think? And we're so fearful of what someone thinks of us that we don't share with them something that could save their life and change their eternity. What are we doing? It's so easy to look at this movie and be like, oh, they're being so selfish. And then we do the same exact thing with something far more important than medicine and technology, with the hope of eternity. And we let the fear stop us from sharing our resources as well. And I think two of our big fears are, well, what if I don't have enough? What if I'm not comfortable? And we allow these fears, especially in America, dictate our lives because we think, well, we need to be comfortable. We need to have enough. And there is a lot of sense to being wise with your time and your money and all that kind of stuff and saving and all of that. That's not what I'm getting at. The point is, like I think a lot of times we are overly fearful and overly selfish. And the Bible said a lot of things about hoarding, and none of them are very good. And we hoard everything. I mean, we hoard our stuff. There's shows called Hoarders, literally, and they don't film those in other countries. They film them in America. Like we're hoarders. And we hoard money, and we hoard knowledge. And the church, man, we're probably more educated about the Bible than any other civilization in the history of the world. We have podcasts, we have books, we have everything. But it's no good if we just hoard it. How about we be obedient to it? How about we share it? Again, maybe the most spiritual thing you have to do is not to learn what the Greek meaning of a word is from the New Testament. How about you just learn to love? I mean, we could get up here, sometimes people are like, oh, we preach about love all the time. Like, we could get up here and preach love every week because none of us do it. I mean, none of us do it well enough, and so we just need to keep on teaching it and keep on praying for it and keep on trying to put it into practice because that's what changes the world. And so often we're just hoarding everything and not giving it to the world that needs it. And we do this because of fear. I wonder if one day we'll get to heaven and God will be like, why didn't you give more? Why were you so worried about a future that you weren't even sure would ever exist? Why were you so worried about 30, 40 years down the road when you weren't even sure what tomorrow brought? Like, there were people around you right then that needed you. They needed your time. They needed your money. They needed food. They needed Jesus. And you ignored them. And that's the truth for all of us. There's so many times where I allow the fear of the future dictate what I do now. And in the end, T'Challa comes to a conclusion that we must not allow this to happen. Check out this last scene. And in the end, King T'Challa realizes what we as followers of Jesus must realize. There's more that connects us than what divides us. That we are all children of God, that we all have a sin problem, that we all need the hope of Jesus, not just in eternity, but also here on earth. A lot of times we're just talking about like, oh, when I die, heaven, hell, all that stuff. But Jesus brought a reality of a change in your life right now. A change in your perspective right now. A change in your relationships and your day-to-day right now. Jesus one time walked into a town and all these crowds were with him, but he was looking for one person. And this guy, you might know the story, he's hiding up in a tree looking at him. And he's a tax collector and nobody likes him, nobody wants anything to do with him. And he calls him down, he says, hey, I'm gonna hang out with you today, I'm coming to your house. And everyone's like, well, you're going to his house? What are you thinking? And in the end, Jesus gives his mission statement. And our mission statement as well. He says, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. He came to seek and to save the lost. Not to be comfortable, not to be worshiped, not to be famous, not to have a certain career or live in a certain place. He came to seek and to save the lost. The conclusion we must come to is that is our mission as well. We are called to reach all nations. We are called to be salt and light. And the world might look at us like we're crazy. In that scene, the guy says, what do you have to offer? You're just a poor third world country with a bunch of farmers. You don't have anything. But everybody that had been in Wakanda knew that they had far more than what meets the eye. And I believe as believers in Jesus, we have far more than what meets the eye. You don't have to have money or fame to impact the people around you. If you have Jesus, the power of the Holy Spirit inside of you, you can do amazing things. You can change people's lives. And you may say, well, I can't change the world. Yeah, you can't. But we could. One person can change one person's life. One person could change two people's lives. Sometimes we think too big picture and we just need to focus on the people around us, our family, our coworkers, the people that we see every day at the businesses we go to, the people we see at the gym or the people we play sports with or whatever, the people that we interact with all the time. Those are the people that we have the opportunity to change. And Jesus said, man, they're gonna look at you like you're foolish. They're gonna kick you out of the synagogues, which for us it might be like, they're gonna kick you out of the social clubs. They might look at you a little weird. They might think, they might talk behind your back a little bit, but who cares? Why are we so scared of that? They do it anyway. I mean, whatever, like about something. So might as well be Jesus, right? And so we are called to go to the world because we have something to offer. We have a power and a hope. We have a power that can change relationships. We have a power that can conquer sin. We have a power that can give hope. We have a power that can fix broken relationships and fix financial situations and fix economies and fix communities and fix crime rates. We have that hope if we'll share it. If we'll share it. So if you're in this room and you're a Jesus follower, consider who you need to share it with. And it may be sharing the gospel, but it also might be sharing your wallet or sharing your home or sharing your time. All with the thought of one day sharing Jesus. And if you're in this room and you say, I'm not a Jesus follower, I want to tell you, there is a hope and a power that maybe you did not know exists. That maybe like the outside world looking at Wakanda, they don't know it exists. There is a power that is available to you. There is a God who understands your tears, that understands your thoughts, that understands your fears, and he wants to live life with you. There is a God who wants to rescue you from sin and from the habits and the mistakes of the past. There's a God who loves you beyond measure, beyond what you can do for him. There's a God chasing after you. There's a God that sent that which was most valuable to him to our earth. There's a God who wants to live life with you, both now and into eternity. If you want to experience that power, I want to invite you into a relationship with Jesus. Paul says in the book of Romans, if you believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord and you confess with your mouth that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So I want to give you that opportunity, not because you can only do it in church, but just because this is our opportunity right now. So if you want to do that, on the count of 3, I want you to raise your hand or remember the time you said yes to Jesus, and I want you to pray this prayer with me. And it's not the specific words that are going to save you, it's believing in your heart and saying what you believe with your mouth. So on the count of 3, raise your hand and then pray this prayer with me. 1, 2, 3. Raise your hand if that's you. Pray this prayer with me. Jesus, I'm yours. I know I've messed up. And I want the hope that you bring. I believe you are the Son of God, that you died for me and you rose again. Forgive me. I want to enter into a relationship with you. I want to follow after you. I want to experience your power guiding my life. In your name we pray. Amen. Let's stand together and let's close by singing our praises to God.